Welcome to the Illuminating Primary Care podcast.
Hello and welcome to Illuminating Primary Care. My name's Kirsty and I'm your host today. I'm joined by Dr. Riccardo DiCuffa, the co-founder and Chief Medical Officer for the private healthcare provider Thyme. Rick has approaching 15 years experience as a GP and began his career with the NHS in secondary care, practicing ENT and surgical disciplines. And Rick co-founded Thyme in 2016 under its previous name, Your Doctor Group. And aside from having a love of Italian cars, Rick has a big passion for good health. So welcome, Rick.
Hello. I think you should put Italian food actually.
Italian food as well. Okay, we'll add that. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you today, Rick. I'm really excited to learn about the foundation and the ethos on which Thyme was founded, which is a phrase that you coined health span. So, Rick, if I could begin by asking you, what is health span?
That's a very good question. The definition of health span is it's the amount of time that you spend in good health. That's the definition.
Mm-hmm.
Um, McKinsey issued a report, I think in 2022, that said that globally people are living longer, but not necessarily healthier.
Mm-hmm.
And the past 60 years has seen massive improvements in the global life expectancy. But the proportion of their life spent in poor health or moderate health has not changed. And that is what the foundations of Thyme has become, that sort of ethos of trying to improve your health span by improving your ongoing quality of life and trying to promote longevity through preventative care. And there is, this is fundamental, in my view, to future generations as we approach a growing population that generally lives longer, but not necessarily healthier. And as we have an aging population with more and more what we call comorbidities, so they're living with more and more illnesses from high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and even cancer care, we will probably find as a society that these problems will become more and more treatable, but we'll still have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. And there won't necessarily be something that will cure that disease. So, for example, cancer care, you may in the future no longer die from cancer, but you won't necessarily get rid of it either. So it will be an ongoing battle through life. And that is the essence of it. There was also another report about health and living a long life. So I believe in the 1970s, a report commissioned said that in the UK and the US, if you had within the top 10 longest living life expectancies in the world, recently the UK has now dropped to the mid 30s, and I believe the US to the 50s. And the reason that health life expectancy is dropping away is because as we get wealthier as a society, we tend to have a better lifestyle. And as we have a better lifestyle, we tend to do less of the important things that keep us healthy. And those are what these are the problems that we need to address. So for me, the message is, how do we increase people's health span, the proportion of life they spend living well? And as a result of that, if we have a longer life and we have a proportion of our life in longer health span, we're going to have a better life experience.
So interesting. Obviously, you've mentioned the crucial sort of change in lifestyle choices, the change in how we do our jobs, and we're less manual than we used to be. So, how important are lifestyle choices when looking at maintaining good health, would you say?
I mean, I think lifestyle is one of the fundamental things that we can change as individuals and as a society. I think for too long, people have always felt that, oh, well, I want to have a good life, and what will be will be. You get that attitude from a number of patients. Oh, well, what will be will be. But there is quite a lot of evidence in the area of what we call healthy aging, which suggests that as a society, future generations could potentially live well over 100.
Wow.
And that is quite appealing to a lot of people, but it will radically change our outlook on life. So, for example, we would have to decide, would we retire at 60, 65 if we're only potentially 60% or halfway through our life? The other question we're all going to have is, what are we going to do with that extra time? And if you ask most people, would you like to live to 110 or 120? They go, well, as long as I could do things that I do now, I absolutely would. But if it means spending 30 years with poor health or chronic illnesses or hospital appointments or residential care, no, it doesn't interest me. And, the debate is, well, what happens if we said that you could do that, but to be able to do that, you need to look at yourself and invest in yourself to make sure that that is a possibility. So in answer to your question about, is lifestyle important? Absolutely. The choices we make on a day-to-day basis are fundamental to our long-term outcome. I mean, more and more of future medicine, or medicine 2.0, or even 3.0, if you want to call it that, will now focus on individualized treatment plans and individualized ways of dealing with your problems. For so long, we have been dealing with people pretty much in the same way. If you have a chest infection, you may give you antibiotics, and the antibiotics will be certain groups and usually quite broad in their range, so that they would attack good and bad bacteria equally. And then what you hope is to support the body to overcome that infection. In the future, it may be that there's a targeting way that you would have a treatment that is specific to that problem. And another example of that is, for example, DNA. So more and more now, and we offer it ourselves, is DNA testing is becoming more and more the norm. And I often get patients saying, well, I'm not sure I really want to know if I've got going to get dementia, doc, and all that. And you say, well, most of the DNA tests will never tell you you're going to get dementia. They'll say that you're more susceptible to getting dementia. But what most people are shocked about when I tell them this is that actually most of the reasons that we develop dementia, if you're susceptible, is because of our lifestyle choices. And I believe it's reported figures up to 90%. So even if you've got a weakness for dementia in your genes, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to develop it, but it does mean you're going to have to look after yourself and do the right things to make sure that you minimize that risk. And I mean, I've worked in the, as you alluded to earlier in the podcast, your doctor, or Thyme as we call ourselves now. And the reason we call it Thyme is because thyme is a medicinal herb known for its antimicrobial properties. And also it's extending your time. So, but it's spelt with a thyme as in the herb thyme. But I dealt with a lot of sort of Hollywood A-listers and seeing celebrities and VIPs as part of my travels as a private doctor. And what I've found is that, societies embrace, the media embrace this the celebrity lifestyle and the youthfulness and the wellness of individuals. If you look at the daily papers like the Daily Mail or any of the tabloids, they're always talking about an Elizabeth Hurley, doesn't she look amazing, or J Lo, or whoever, and most people will say, yeah, but they've had a pretty good life and, they've got lots of money. And you go, well, that's true to an extent. But as a society, people are living generally a bit healthier. The younger generations, they use what they say, the new 50 is the new 40 and the new 60 is the new 50. That's because we don't smoke as much anymore and we do more exercise and we're a bit more aware about what we should be doing. But these VIPs, they may have good genes. They may be genetically predisposed to aging a little less quickly than I am. Brad Pitt, for example, was on the papers, wasn't he, at Wimbledon? Oh, how amazing he looks. But I promise you, and I know for a fact, that a lot of them are on very tight regimes of exercise, nutritional eating. You talk to a lot of celebrities, they say, I don't drink very much, or, I don't eat much sugar, or this is the key for everybody to understand that beauty lies within and not just on the outside. Botox and skin creams and surgery and looking fabulous on the outside is great, but you've got to look at what's going on in the inside. And if you don't provide the right nutrition and the right sort of support for your body systems, you're going to age quicker than you necessarily need to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I was going to ask about the pandemic and whether you thought that had a bearing on how people look in health, but do you think people are very influenced by people who are on the TV, celebrities, and they look amazing, they look, the picture of health, or both maybe?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic has changed people's perception of life. I think for me, people have sort of made them reflect on what it is they want out of life. Stress and anxiety has been on the increase. There's a lot more awareness of other people's lives, via social media, via the newspapers, or programs about the wealthy and the rich and the beautiful, and I think that everybody has the potential to achieve those things, but like all things in life, you have to invest in yourself. For me, the greatest asset that we have is our body. It's ourselves. And some of us do have a more no, that's not correct. Some of us are a bit unfortunate in the fact that maybe the hand we're dealt is not as fortunate as others. Some people, unfortunately, are born with genetic diseases from a very early age, and there's not much you can do about that, except, you can't change that via lifestyle. But that number is small. Most of us are dealt a fairly decent hand, and it's how we play it. And for me, a lot of people take advantage of their hand, but they don't play it correctly because they take it for granted that their health will always be good, that they won't develop heart disease, that they won't develop type 2 diabetes, or they won't develop cancer. Cancer rates are on the rise, or sort of mental health illnesses like anxiety, depression, the autistic spectrum, allergies, food intolerances are all on the rise, and you question how can that be, and there's a lot of theories, and no one knows for sure, but the evidence seems to suggest that it is about all the stuff that's been on the television recently from Dr. Tim Spector and Dr. Chatterjee and all these types of influencers who are saying, look, what we eat, what we get from supermarkets, what we get from convenience stores are not necessarily healthy for you. For many years, people have drunk, low fat drinks, fizzy drinks, 10 a penny, energy drinks, they're full of chemicals, full of additives, preservatives, sweeteners, and they do tremendous damage to our bodies and to our gut in particular. So, in essence, yes, we can improve things. Yes, the pandemic has changed people's perception, and I think people are reflecting on whether they should, look after themselves better and have more balance in their lives. I think that is true. I'm not sure whether people understand that they need to change their perspectives and the way that they view their health.
Yeah, I certainly read that the processed food industry had a lot to do with our health or lack thereof, lots of additives and lots of things that our bodies are just not used to processing. So yeah, I did read quite a lot about that, and obviously that's something that's changed since maybe the 60s and 70s, and escalated from there. We dine out a lot more. There's more fast food, a fast food joint on every corner. So it's become a part of daily life rather than the meat and two veg that our sort of grandparents had. So yeah, I think that's probably a lot to do with it.
I totally agree. I totally agree with everything you're saying. I
Mm,
think we've taken for granted that when we come to nutrition, that if we buy something from a store of any type, that we presume that what they're providing us with is safe to eat and is healthy. What we misconstrue is that a lot of the food provided has to have certain additives and chemicals and preservatives to give them the sort of shelf life that allows them to stock and sell. What I think as a society we've not understood is that we pay a price for that. Now, unfortunately, as always in life, there are some people who say, well, I can't really afford to eat healthily, or I can't afford to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. But the frozen veg, for example, have been shown to be very high in minerals and vitamins. And it's moving away from convenience food and meals, and more towards going back to what our grandparents did, who probably, or great grandparents, who would probably argue that they didn't necessarily have all the money in the world, but they were much more self-sufficient, much more capable of creating simpler meals. I mean, you probably can tell from my name that I have an Italian heritage, hence my Italian love for things. Food, as pretty much everyone in this country knows, is a very big passion in Italy. It's the thing that sort of is one of the main pillars of Italian society. It's a very important aspect of their daily lives. And my Italian grandparents had very, very little money, but they always managed to provide nutritious foods. They would try and grow their own vegetables. My granddad used to make vinegar for wine, and things like that. But the realities of it was my granddad lived to 95, and my nan lived to their mid-80s, and that was many, many years ago. And they had a very simple life, and they ate what they could, to the point that even my father would say that eating meat was a real treat. It was not a normal thing to have on the table. And that is probably where we're going to have to head back towards a society where we eat more simply, and cook from scratch.
Yeah, the Mediterranean diet is it's always been up there as one of the most healthy, even though, like you say, vinegar, oils, wine, a big part of the Mediterranean diet, but still healthier. It seems that what we have in the UK and certainly across the states as well. So yeah, it's the balance, isn't it, and the raw ingredients, like you say.
I read an article recently said that the US had managed to export the single most terrible diet in the world and export it around the world, which
Yeah,
made me
true.
chuckle. And they were obviously emphasizing the sort of fast food culture, um, and how it's been embraced. And in societies which previously didn't have access to this type of food, obesity levels have started to rise, uh, sort of type 2 diabetes, and all these kinds of illnesses that were never usually associated with their sort of culture has seen an increase as a result of embracing that sort of a diet. So it's quite telling.
Yes, I also read that there was a correlation between fast food and processed diets, um, and also the rise in mental health, like you mentioned earlier, the autistic spectrum, ADHD, and these sorts of things, alongside gut health problems as well, and the two, like the brain gut access.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's one of the crucial hubs that we've sort of ignored as a society, and I think we're becoming increasingly aware of it. I mean, there's some very prominent figures out there in the healthy aging sector, as they call it, who are very big advocates of us going back to basics. A guy called Dr. Hyman in the US, who has written many good books. One was Forever Young, and he sort of talks about his experience as a 60-year-old now, but he has all the energy and a biological age in his 40s. And how he's managed to turn his illnesses, which he was suffering with in his 20s and 30s, around by focusing on his health and his gut nutrition. The gut is probably the most important organ in the body. It's where we do a lot of the work of turning food into nutrition for the body. Minerals and vitamins are absorbed that way. And what we've found is that by encouraging chemicals into the system, whether that's through preservatives, flavorings, whether it's through processed foods, even simple things when you think about them, like chlorinated water, which we have in the tap water, which obviously provides us with safe drinking water, but actually, that chlorination will obviously kill bacteria in your gut. And what they found is that as we develop more symptoms like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which is on the rise, it seems to indicate that you have more and more dysfunction, which leads to poor immune response, because 70 to 80% of our immunity is based on our gut health. And the gut is made up of trillions and trillions of bacteria. And one of the things that's always fascinated me is that our gut makes up 99% of our DNA. Now, if you think about that, what it's saying is our DNA, normally, we only make up 1% of our whole body, because there's so many bacteria and viruses and fungi with their DNA added on. We're only 1% of our organism, our body. And so what it makes you realize is that without that, we wouldn't survive, we wouldn't live.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of research on when they've treated animals for antibiotics, and they found that animals weren't putting on weight or were malnourished. They found that when they looked at their gut flora, it was in poor health. You only have to look at the medical profession, where we've treated patients for very serious illnesses, lots of antibiotics, and they can develop quite serious gut infections. And everyone knows of Clostridium difficile, which is a very hard thing to treat, where numerous courses of antibiotics for maybe a very severe infection has led to this problem. And these patients become very, very unwell and very, very sick. And it's quite evident that if we didn't have the right bacteria, we wouldn't survive very long. So we have to treat our gut like a garden, tending to it, feeding it, watering it, all the things that you would think about if you had your own garden. And what I think we're starting to realize is that probably we need to start thinking about what we put in our mouths, what we do on a day-to-day basis, because everything we do encourages a healthy gut environment. And the evidence suggests that if you've got a good, healthy gut environment, you have a good immune response, and therefore you'd feel energetic, you'll age slower, you'll probably live healthier, you're much more likely to delay illnesses coming along later on in life.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I read a book called 10% Human, and that described exactly what you were talking about just
Yes, I've
then.
read that book. It's
So,
very good as well.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, but to do all this, you need to do the testing. We do microbiome testing. It's all sent to America at the moment. Fascinating reports that come back, and how the imbalances in groups of bacteria can influence that. And from a medical perspective, as a doctor, and I've spent many years, 25 years probably as a doctor all in all now, which is quite hard to believe. Many years in hospital treating very sick patients, and in general practice as well. And, most doctors have very good intentions. We want to help this person. They say, well, I've got a cough. Can I have some antibiotics? And we try to resist, but sometimes we go, okay, maybe you should. Antacids, for reflux, acid reflux that a lot of people suffer from, um, anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen. All these, just to name a few of the medicines, have a massive impact on our gut flora. And lots of patients throughout their life have had a variety of these tablets, in one guise or another. And sometimes you wipe out a whole population of gut flora. And they looked at one of the books, I can't remember which one I read it in, but they looked at nomadic tribes based in the Amazon rainforest or Africa. And they found that when they looked at their gut flora, they would have thousands of different types of bacteria. If they looked at Europeans, on average, we'd have maybe tens of different bacteria.
Wow.
And the reason that was prominent, the reason that prompted so much research was because these tribes have very low rates of heart disease and cancers relative to Western populations. And so, when they dug it and researched it a little more, they found that these people were eating much more nomadically. So they would eat, herbs and greenery, which haven't been farmed in a high intensity. They're natural. They would, may have some meat and some fish, and very much whatever they could take, they would eat. And whereas a lot of the stuff that we have, to some extent, has been processed. But it's important that we reflect that we're safer having vegetables, fruit, organic meats, fishes, and having less of those if we can't afford them, and having more veg, than to go and have ready meals or convenience sauces or things like that. My wife bought some my wife bought some flatbreads the other day, and she bought two types actually. One was a small one, Piadina, which is a small Italian flatbread, and there was a bigger one. And the Piadina had just wheat, salt, water, and olive oil. The other flatbread had all kinds of things like preservatives, emulsifiers, flavorings. And the thing is, you look at it and you wouldn't think anything of it. You think it's just flatbread. But one of them probably will do you a lot more harm than the other one.
Yeah, there's been quite an emphasis on just actually reading the label and looking at what
Correct.
you're consuming. Yeah. So, from your perspective, obviously we're living in the Western world. If we were a tribe and just eating from the land, then chances are we would have much better bacteria. But I guess including food and including all of the good healthy habits that you could have to really promote good health, what would you recommend for the people listening to this podcast?
I think the important thing for people to understand is we're living in an age now where societies are changing. There's more information than ever before, and there's more access to, testing and, medical advice. However, in the Western world, most health systems are under tremendous strain now. There's fewer and fewer doctors and nurses as the population tends to increase, and we're all aging, and there's less people coming through. So for me, the importance for people to understand is that we've got to start investing in our own health. And for me, one of the best strategies of all is just having regular health checks. I have a lot of foreign patients come to see me because they come to the UK and live for a few months or a couple of years. And they'll say to me, I'm gobsmacked that you don't just routinely do blood tests for this or for that. And you go, the NHS will only treat if you have symptoms or problems. But health checks pick up things often before you're even symptomatic. So, recently we had a 51-year-old chap who had a malignant polyp in his bowel, which we picked up on testing. And he had no symptoms. We had a 43-year-old chap who was diagnosed with prostate cancer, but again he had no symptoms. A 32-year-old who had type 1 diabetes, which is very unusual because it's quite late developing. But he described no symptoms that he thought would even give him an idea that he needs to see the doctor. And the importance of health checks is that you start to formulate a plan, and sometimes you need to go deeper into the testing than you think. I mean, in the US, they'll do up to 120 profiles or panels of testing. In the UK, we'll do 20 to 30. And I think as an NHS doctor, as a population, we've always gone, the NHS will look after us if we're sick. But the problem is we can all see the NHS is under tremendous stress now. And I think that there's only one person who can ever look after themselves, and that's yourself. And I think we've got to, as a society, start to think about doing health checks, getting blood tests. Unfortunately, the NHS probably will not ever be able to provide that. It is so busy with just dealing with people who've got what we call reactive medical issues. They're never going to be able to focus on the preventative and the proactive stuff. But I think that research has shown that if you start doing regular health checks in your 30s and 40s, you can extend your health span by up to 15 years, and even in your 60s and 70s, up to 3 or 4 more extra years. Because if you treat problems early, because you found them early, the outcomes are much better. And so for me, the 3 main things I'd always say to patients, beyond investing in themselves and maybe removing one weekend trip to Europe, because that's probably the equivalent cost, is to keep a healthy weight, eat as well as you can, do some exercise, and don't smoke. I mean, of all the parameters, not smoking is probably one of the most harmful things we can do. But if nothing more, exercise, healthy weight, good eating will get you a long way. But like I said, if you want to do what we spend our whole lives looking at, celebrities on holiday in their small bikinis or six packs, looking well, then you need to do it properly.
Yeah. And that's something that's you were mentioning about the testing and things like that. I'm going to wrap up with one question, if I may. But yes, Thyme ultimately is supporting the NHS by helping people look after their health, and then obviously they'll have to go to the doctor less and less, which is fantastic. I'm going to finish with this question, if I may, a personal question. What are your health rituals, Rick?
It's interesting. I try to do everything in balance. If that's there's no specific formula, and I always say this to my patients: no one's going to live perfectly for 100% of the time. Very few people want to do that. I'm going out this weekend, and I shouldn't really have anything to drink, and I don't know what's on the menu. So I say, look. At the end of the day, just do it 80% of the 70-80% of the time, eat well, look after yourself, and 20 or 30% of the time, you can enjoy yourself. If you go on holiday and you're having a few more drinks than you normally do, then so be it, because that will improve your mental health. But everything has to be in balance, and that's the bit that I always say patients to focus. I sort of, try to do a couple of sessions of exercise. I definitely cook up a lot, and my wife cooks a lot from scratch. We've even started growing our own veg in a little garden patch. Not very successful, to be honest with you, but we try. I don't buy many sauces or things like that. I make it all myself. I drink in moderation. I really don't drink a lot these days. I probably have a couple of glasses of wine a week, and try and sleep well, but keep fit. And that doesn't mean running marathons. I'm not built for that. I try to do things I enjoy, play golf or tennis, but I try to do some Pilates and stretches, and that's what I try to do. And when I go on holiday, my wife absolutely hates me because she goes, when you're the only person, when you go on holiday, you start being even healthier. And that's because when I'm at work, I tend to cheat, and I go, all right, I'll have a biscuit with a cup of tea. But in reality, when you go on holiday, it's my time to think, yeah, I'm getting a bit stressed out. I'm not eating well. I start wanting to go for long walks, play tennis. I want the salad and I'll have the chicken, but having variety. There's no good thing having the same things all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And you've mentioned something crucial there as well. There's no point in slogging yourself, going for a run if you really hate it. You'll
Yeah.
just not continue. You do
No.
something that you enjoy.
Everyone's what we do is we sort of bespoke our treatments to those individuals. And what works for one person doesn't work for another. And we do microbiome testing, blood tests, mineral tests, vitamin tests, DNA testing. The reason we do all that is because you get information from that individual. So, for example, vitamin D, there is some argument that, low vitamin D will lead to rickets and all kinds of bone diseases. So take a small amount of vitamin. We need 30 or 40 units per day to minimize that. And we'd have a normal vitamin D. But the problem is it optimal for you? But some people, when you do their DNA testing, you will find that they are not very good at processing vitamin D. So if they've got normal levels, giving them a vitamin D supplement or them taking a vitamin D supplement could actually stress the body quite a bit, and actually would be more harmful than having a low vitamin D. So by knowing that information, you can get better advice, and you can see the value of that.
Yeah, yeah. So to summarize, inform yourself, be informed, variety, raw ingredients to food, balance, fun.
My nan always used to say to me, my English nan always used to say to me, Rick, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably the way we have to lead our lives in the future. We have to accept that as a society, we're going to live longer, but we want to live healthier. So, invest in yourself, eat a good balanced dinners and variety, do moderate exercise, but enjoy life as well. Don't let it become a chore, because if it's making you miserable, that's not going to be any use for you either.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Thank you so much for that, Rick. It's just so interesting to have a good chat with you today.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. If anyone has any comments or questions, you are welcome to include them in the comments section below. We will respond as soon as possible, and stay tuned for more podcasts on illuminating primary care.